on podcast number 5 already. Seems to have gone very, very quickly.
Yes, definitely feels quicker than I would have thought.
Very quickly. So, beard check, trimmed. Is this a keeper?
I was hoping to keep it long, and so I asked for the beard trim, hoping it would be.
Oh, you went to a pro.
Yes. No, I was going to go for the haircut, the beard trim, all at the same time, but then. It's like one of those when you're like, and you're like, oh. No. I felt like I lost 2 weeks of my life. So now I went from I think a decent second to dead last.
Okay. Oh, so, okay. Well, this is the final day. So,
it is more shaped.
We'll have to see. I imagine Nikki will win.
Yeah.
The girl always wins, even though she doesn't. I mean, she doesn't really grow facial hair apparently.
But yes.
All right, so topic for today. This is something that you mentioned last time. I think it's probably a topic of interest because I think there's a perception as to how we work around here, and while the segment that we're going to talk about today is a very prominent part of our business, it doesn't represent the majority of our business, but it's still an important one. So why don't you lead in with that? Because you have more contact with this population than I. I have the indirect contact, I think, with them more than normal. Yeah,
and I think a lot of people when they open a business, especially if they've been around sports, the natural tendency is to think, I want to work with pro athletes.
Right.
And I applaud that, but I also would just tell you that it's not probably what you think.
Right.
It's not going to be nearly as big of a driver of business as you would think.
Right.
And, at the end of the day, it's a constant revolving door because even in a best case scenario, they have in seasons, right? And generally in pros, long seasons, yes. So unless you are just stacking cash for 3 or 4 months and you are very good and live off it for 8 months, right. It's kind of a hard way to build a sustainable business that runs and operates for 12 months out of the year.
What's the longest that you've ever had somebody since we've opened?
Probably somebody like Jeelan, because you might get them for 5 or 6 months.
Okay, yeah. So he's prepping for a specific season that I would say that he's the exception to the rule. So he's getting ready for XFL, so he's had plenty of time, and he played in, was it the AAF?
Yes.
Yeah. And then, so now he moves to the XFL. So that's an unusual long off season but under most circumstances. But you think back, with the first MLS guys that we got, and even they don't have a really long off season.
No, I mean, you look at the MLS, your best case scenario, you're going to have maybe 10 weeks. That's a best case. They don't go to the playoffs. They don't have any sort of cups or challenges. They have to start the year off where they report early. So yeah, in a best case, maybe 8 to 10 weeks. But I mean, we've had a guy like Chad Marshall wins an MLS Cup, gets called into January camp. Oh, boom! You have a 3.5 week off season.
Yeah, there you go. There's your short off season.
Yeah,
and so you're probably looking at maybe at the best under the best circumstances. You got 2-3 months tops to try to make an impact. And so now you have this phase of recovery from the season, and then you got to ramp them right back up. So they're ready to go. So it's a bigger challenge than what most people understand.
Well, and this is the thing that I struggle with is a lot of times when they're coming off a season and you're their private strength coach or whatever your title is, you feel compelled to throw the whole bag at them on day one, versus having that long-term thought process or that long-term approach of, look, this guy has just come off, or gal has played 7, 8, 9 months of competitive sport. They're probably going to take 2 weeks off just for mental, decompression, go on a vacation. And then, okay, well, now you got to kind of ease them back into things, but at the same time, you don't have that long to string it out either. So I think that's where you get in trouble. And let's be honest, a lot of times you don't have 12 weeks straight.
Right.
You may have 2 weeks and then they're going to go on another vacation, or there's a break, or there's a holiday. So it's 12 weeks in whole, but maybe you have 8 or 9 with that. And that's a best case scenario, because if we're being realistic, we live in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
It's not a thriving hotbed of nightlife and entertainment if you're a young 22, 23-year-old with a decent amount of money in your pocket. So
Right.
we may get them for as little as a week, and we get them for a week, and then they implement that program, for the next 4.
Right.
And then they maybe come back for another week, or we do some stuff online and we send them back. So I think to circle back to this, what a lot of people would say is, well, how did you get started with pro athletes? And so I will give you guys really the Danny O'Rourke story.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy that really started a lot of this for us. And part of the reason that we got Danny was because Bill and I were prolific and we were creating content, and so he found us because of the Bulletproof Knees manual. If you remember that,
right? Well,
relic.
he had 2 knee surgeries.
I think 2 knee surgeries.
2 knee surgeries. Yeah, and so, and also a guy that really was interested in this side of the business, like to understand what this process was about, and really dug in and educated himself.
Yeah.
So what we've been very lucky. We've had a lot of great professional guys come in here, and the guys that are interested and inquisitive are the most fun to work with. But I would say that Danny probably took that to the extreme.
Yes.
In many ways, even from his studies when he went back to school after he retired. But go ahead and tell that story.
So, Danny comes in and he had found some of our work. So he came over, and he was luckily living in Columbus at the time, which is like a 3-hour drive. It's not a crazy amount of time to get somewhere. But, he came over, and he would come over for these week-long periods of time, and we would basically train every day. He would see you to start, kind of get his marching orders as far as what he could and couldn't do. Right. And then we would build out these 4-week blocks. We would basically work with him for the first week. He'd go back for 3 or 4, and then we would do that over the course of the off season. As he started to progress, obviously, like to think we did some good positive things for him. Obviously, he worked hard and did all the things outside of the gym. But it comes back to what we talked about in our last show, that word of mouth. Because now Danny is a believer in what we're doing. He's feeling better. He's back on the pitch. And so he starts telling his friend Chad, who, I didn't know who Chad Marshall was. I wasn't a soccer guy at that point in time. Right. But he starts telling his friend Chad, this is something you need to do. And so then the next offseason, Chad comes, and he works out a couple times. And then now it's this snowball effect, right? Because there's this element of when you're doing good work, people will tell other people. But there's also, especially in this day and age, there is an element of social proof to it.
Right.
So, Danny O'Rourke and Chad Marshall are going there. So now Dave Tinney's going to refer Eric Zavaleta, who's, again, a local kid. Right. He's going to train here. And Lori Lindsay starts to come in. So, that's really how it started for us with regards to professional athletes is we had a proven product. It just hadn't been proven at that level. Right. But over time, as you get the reps, as you get more and more comfortable, as you see some success, then you start to kind of reap what you sow, so to speak.
Yeah, and this just goes back to what I said in an earlier episode when we were talking about the marketing side of things, is that all your marketing comes down to word of mouth. And so, again, having that one opportunity, maximizing that opportunity, and there's probably an element of luck as far as having Danny as the first client because of his inquisitive nature, and because he really took it to the nth degree as far as his commitment to follow through and doing whatever it took. Yeah. And so again, luck definitely being on our side. And I don't know if you were someone looking in from the outside at this, as how would they get started in that type of a process, if that is the goal, to work with professional athletes?
Yeah, and I think where there's a couple things that need to be addressed. First off, you need to be, it's kind of a double-edged sword, but you need to be ready. You're knowing that you're never fully ready. Right? Like mentally you can be ready, but it's totally different when you're in that environment, and a professional athlete kind of senses weakness. Right. They've been around a lot of people, so they know if you know what you're doing or not. So there's that element of that and being prepared. But then there's also just this element of proximity and luck and geography. Like, at the end of the day, if you live in the middle of nowhere and you want to work with professional athletes, you're probably not in the best spot. And there's a reason that, we've been lucky here in Indianapolis, because there are enough people that call it home, or there's enough people that are willing to travel here. It's not like it's, Muncie. Indiana, right? Which is where I grew up. Nobody's coming to Muncie, except maybe Bonzi Wells, who was like the lone NBA basketball player out of the area. But it's just eminently easier if you live in Miami or New York or Chicago or LA. So the thing that has allowed us to be successful is that we have had such great success. We've had just a great amount of support from the people that have come through our doors.
Correct.
And so some people are willing to just forego the fact that, okay, it's Indianapolis, it's not Miami or LA or somewhere warm and cushy, but I'm willing to come there and put in the work. Right. The thing that's great about that, and Joey Burton, our basketball guy, he and I talk about this all the time. Like, we know if somebody's going to come here even for a week, like, they're committed to their craft.
And I think that's to their credit. Is we have had a couple of situations that I think were less than ideal in regards to some of the pros that have come through here. But talk about few and far between. I think that the quality of individual that we've had and the commitment level of the individual makes all the difference in the world. But you still have to provide the product.
Absolutely.
And if we can break our own arms, patting ourselves in the back, I think that we've done that, and we've demonstrated our ability to be successful with this population. And again, that just is a credit to our people here, and then like I said, a credit to the people that have come through that are the workers.
Yeah,
they really are.
So we talked about in previous shows the so that, and having a so that. Well, I mean, that's one thing that I love about this population is their so that is so clear. Right. It's not wishy-washy. Yeah. I want to do this so that I can make money and play sports, which is their end goal and their dream. And so what's fun about this is, again, it's not LA, it's not New York, so it's a different kind of breed that's going to come here and spend an off season. Yeah. So, a guy like Glenn, now granted, he's sort of from the area. Right. But he could be a lot of places, right? Absolutely. He makes enough money. He could be in LA or Miami or New York. But the fact that he's here for probably 10 out of 12 to 13 weeks in the off season speaks volumes. And then, another guy, Keelan Martin, he's from Louisville. Right? So he could go anywhere. And the fact that he spends basically 3 months out of his off season here working with me, working with Joey, is a testament to the type of character and the work ethic that these guys have. And then it's not a shock. Like, because I watch all the games now. My NBA League Pass is a business write-off, right? Because I work with these guys.
Well, there you go. You have to watch.
So that's how I think of it. Yeah. But it's like people are watching these guys. Like, oh, where did this guy come from? And it's like, well, I've seen the work that they put in. Dakota Mathias, another one. I've seen the work that they put in over multiple off seasons to get to this point, so it's not a shock. Right.
So let's talk a little bit about process then, because while it varies a little bit, it's not so far up from what our typical process would be when we work with any particular athlete. But let's go through this in a like a segment by segment kind of a structure as to how we actually do this coming in. And I think that the primary element that we bring these guys into the purple room for the sole purpose of let's just see what happened to them during the season.
Yes.
Right. So we have to establish, okay, where are we actually starting from, because they accumulate stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
So whether it be the stress that's associated with just being the professional athlete, the constant pull of travel, the schedule, the execution, etc. They all come in with something. Whether we perceive it as an injury or not, we establish this foundation of, okay, here's what they're bringing to the table this year, and we do see the changes from year to year, especially when we see the guys that have been playing for 10 years.
Yes,
they've accumulated a great deal of interference, if you will, that would allow them to perform freely. And so we start with the purple room evaluation, and then from that we establish, okay, these are the do's and don'ts.
Yep.
Basically, and it's not a matter of me having to tell you what to do. It's more of like here's what I wouldn't do, and then everything else is on the table.
Yes.
And then we progress there. And then from my perspective, what I do is then it's just a periodic follow-up to make sure that whatever was interfering to begin with is slowly disappearing,
Yes.
and then as the performance gets superimposed on top of that, but then it literally falls onto your shoulders most of the time.
Yeah, well, and I want to circle back to this because a lot of times people ask me what my assessment processes look like, and I always tell people I'm the worst person at IFAST to talk about assessments with because I do the least. Because the population that I work with at this point in time, if they get paid to play sport, they're going to you. Right? There's no sense in me doing an assessment, my 5th assessment of the year in December with a professional athlete. Like, how many assessments do you do every week?
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, you do more in a day than I do in a year.
Right.
So I always send them to him first because I want to get that baseline of where are they moving well, what are they not. And you bring up such a good point because the first goal of every offseason for me is to basically give them their movement options back.
Right.
It's shocking, and maybe not if you do enough of these and you see enough of these guys walk through your doors, but how restricted their movement is by the end of a competitive season.
Yeah.
And we could name 1,000 reasons why that is, right? But at the end of the day, movement options are limited. I want to give them those back.
Right.
And then from there, then absolutely. It's like, okay, how much time do we have now? What other needs and goals do we have? And I'm always thinking, man, I would love to throw the whole bag at them and, create the Instagram highlight reel, but sometime an offset push-up, with left arm on box.
Yeah.
It's not sexy, but it's what that guy needs to progress and evolve as an athlete. So then I just look at, okay, how much time do we have? What can we achieve in that period of time? What are their needs and goals? And, I think the final thing for me is what kind of shape do they need to be in when they show up to preseason? They don't need peak condition. And this is a mistake that I see. They either show up hopefully out or like woefully out of shape or in tremendous shape and it's not sustainable and they break down 3 months into the season.
Right.
So there's this sweet spot where they're moving really good. They feel really well. They've got this base level of strength, power, explosiveness. We build up the connective tissues so that it'll support the next 7, 8, 9 months of training. And so that's kind of the thought process for me. It's, man, I would love to throw the Instagram highlight reel at everybody, but it's just not realistic based on what these guys need.
Right. The perception is that it's like the movie training montage where
it's like Rocky IV.
Exactly.
He's like doing sit-ups and hitting his and
right. When the reality is that because you have such a small window of opportunity, you really have to narrow down what adaptations you're going to chase.
Absolutely.
And thankfully, because these guys have been trained over a longer period of time and they do have a legitimate training age, which is great, then it just becomes this superimposition of certain adaptations on top of what they already have, which is very, very, I'm very, very thankful for that because it does make this process a little bit easier to execute.
So I'm going to bring this back to you because I think this is a really relevant thing. So the day and age that we live in now is if I'm not, doing 360 dunks after my first week, or I'm not doing, just dripping with sweat, collapsed on the floor, then I'm not getting a good session in.
Right.
And so this is applicable, I think, whether it's pro athletes or Gen Pop. There's this level of skepticism when what you do is different from what they expect, right? So especially when somebody comes in here, maybe they expect some whatever, like TheraBand exercises or stretches. Mm-hmm. How do you explain some of what we do to somebody if they are skeptical? Like, why am I doing this, or how does this benefit me? Like maybe if they don't understand the process, how do you explain the process that makes it understandable or relatable to them?
Right. So the easiest way, and what we're talking about is getting somebody to buy into your program. The easiest way is to actually demonstrate change.
Okay.
And so when we get somebody that comes in and one, they recognize where they may have a limitation or they feel pressures or tensions or maybe they're not comfortable with something. And so part of the assessment process is to expose those and let them feel and see what happens when we ask them to perform some form of movement. And if there is that limitation and they do recognize that, then it's just a matter of saying, let me show you how we can either eliminate this limitation or enhance your ability to access a position and so on. And so that's the buy-in.
Right.
When you can demonstrate that change, and it happens in just a few minutes typically, and especially with these guys, they're wired so well from a nervous system standpoint that they change and adapt rather readily. that's the ultimate buy-in, is you show an immediate change, and then they get the aha moment where they go, oh, so what I don't need to do is this other stuff. And it's like, exactly. Right. And if I can use, I tell you who was one of the most inquisitive people was Glenn.
Yeah.
So Glenn Robertson was one of the nicest, kindest human beings, which I just love that to death, because you think that you have this preconceived notion as to how somebody's going to be when they walk in the door, high level athlete, and
pedigree.
I mean, because we've had a few, like I said, we've had a few.
Yeah.
And he came in and really, and it wasn't just the buy-in moment. It was the, what else can I do?
Yes.
Kind of a guy.
Yeah. And
that was really powerful for me to actually have somebody like that. And then it became just such an easier process. But once he saw how quickly he could change, totally bought in, and then it was just a matter of like reeling him in. It's like, okay, I don't need you to do all this other stuff. I don't need you to go above and beyond, because that's what he wanted to do.
Right.
But that's basically what you have to be able to show that immediate change, because yanking and pulling on stuff or trying to do some sort of rehabilitative exercise when we really don't need to rely on that type of an isolative type of an activity for these type of athletes, it's just unnecessary. But that's what they've been used to, and until you demonstrate the fact that these are really unnecessary, they continue to have that thought process. But then, like I said, you get that aha moment, and then everything goes exceptionally well after that.
And one thing that I think is always fun and always interesting when you do this is, it's one thing to explain, you don't have much hip rotation, and look at this, and let me show you. Mm-hmm. But what's most important to these guys is when you can explain it in their terms, right? So your inability to do this, I bet, and then you predict their exact movement issue, and they're like, oh yeah, I really do kind of struggle to push to my left. And you're like, oh, well, here's how we're going to fix that. So you give them that element of that. And, one other thing that I wanted to touch on, and I know this is something that we have both talked about numerous times, but when it comes to developing these guys, I think it's so easy to look at the low-hanging fruit when it comes to building an athlete. And so often now we get caught up in this focus of, well, we just need to strength train them more, right? And we need to get them stronger. Right. And so I think this is something that at least early on, people had questions as to, well, why aren't you pushing as much weight, or why aren't we trap barring 4 and 5 and 600 pounds like we used to? It's not to say we don't use those tools, but we're a little bit more judicious and when we apply them. And so I think this is something too, where as you look at the big picture, there's certain elements that you need to train to get an athlete ready. Strength may or may not be one of them. And a lot of times, if you're working with a pro athlete, sure, you can continue to push the strength button, but is that something that's really going to benefit them and take their game and their performance to the next level? And so I think if you're owning, or if you operate in a private facility, sure, you can continue to just give them more of what they know, or you can find a way to, in an authentic way that's going to help them become a better athlete, enhance their athletic performance. And that, when you can do that, now I think it helps you stand apart from what everybody else is doing.
I totally agree, obviously.
I'd be really disappointed if you didn't. Stop the show now.
The thing that people need to realize is that we have a number of tools that we would use, and the goal is to create the performance within the sporting context, not the performance in the gym. And so it's easy to chase numbers and put more weight on the bar, but is that enhancing anything that we're trying to provide this athlete, to allow them to perform better, to increase their resilience, increase their resistance to stress? It's like, so where do I place that element of whether it be strength or force production, however you want to look at it? If somebody doesn't come in with that limitation, I don't need to spend a whole lot of time doing that. Yeah. And I think that's one of the mistakes within the industry, is that because it is easy to demonstrate progress, that it gets overemphasized.
Absolutely.
And then can become destructive.
Absolutely.
Because again, I'm stealing something from you now. And I always fond to talk about this, is that there are secondary consequences to everything that we do.
Yes.
And so that's the thing that we need to consider when you're creating this structure, especially with these narrow windows of opportunity, with the short off seasons, is that where do I really want to spend my time? What is the adaptation that is going to be most beneficial? And there are people that we need to bring in and put some weight on the bar. There's no question about that. But again, it comes down to